It's another episode of Feed the Trolls, and we have a returning guest. Launders is with us for the second time. And before we started recording, I actually had a laugh because he mentioned way back in the beginning, he said, are we doing the same thing where it's kind of like one guest has one side of an opinion and then the other? And I was like, no, we stopped doing that in like episode 4 because basically we all just agreed that certain teams were rubbish and we couldn't find someone to jump on the other side. So now it's just a conversation talking about teams that are rubbish. No, that's not fair. They're not terrible. But we are going to be talking about complexity and their lack of form. That's the kind of the conversation we want to have in this particular episode. Before we get into talking about complexity, though, Launders, I kind of want to paint a pretty picture. And it's actually not a pretty picture. It's quite an ugly picture of North American Counter-Strike right now. Because before COVID, it felt like a thriving ecosystem. It was a good place to play. There was really good talent coming out of there. What the hell has happened to that scene?
I mean, I think to speak seriously, I feel like we've always been an overrated region, overrepresented in terms of fan base, and never had the quality of teams. But we also have been very unlucky, I think, at moments in terms of like, and this isn't supposed to be funny at all, but like when iBUYPOWER, all those 5 players got banned, they were like 5 out of the 5 best players in North America all on the same team. Like people thought, well, there's Cloud9 and the Hiko lineup and everything, but iBUYPOWER were the better team. DaZe is the better IGL. AZK is the best anchor. Like they were stacked. So when they all got banned at the same time, that genuinely set us back like a really good amount. And then as like time went on, we kept kind of getting moments like that. Like COVID was another thing that just destroyed North America. Valorant absolutely destroyed North America, where everyone experienced in tier 2 left to go to Valorant. They weren't good enough to be top players, but they were definitely qualified enough to coach an entire generation of tier 2 North American players. And so since then, we have been left without any leadership in the middle, sort of that tier 2 for North America to kind of make good players. And it was already difficult.
Fair points. I mean, Thorin, are you in agreement there with Launders? The COVID, Valorant, the whole sort of thing just kind of built up on one another and broke the scene down?
I mean, one of the other problems you have is that as we had this world where, whether it's from partnership slots or the money you can make from major, there is money you can make from CS, but the implication is it's way harder than any other game. If you just exist in the Overwatch League or LCS, you just get literally handed your sack of money. There's your cut of the revenue. And then it's based on how the league does. It's not even based on if you're like the best org. And as Richard has pointed out many, many times, it does feel like a lot of the North American owners, that's just the model because of traditional sports. They understand. It's the same way. It doesn't matter how advanced esports gets. You actually have to have a guy who can go into a boardroom and do a presentation, not that dissimilar to a Mad Men episode, to somebody who's like 60 who controls a budget. You're not actually talking to a Zoomer or a Gen Alpha guy. So I do think, unfortunately, a lot of how CS is run now, like it's really, really hard, and it's mainly the European orgs. Because I would say if you think just before the online period, that was when Flashpoint was about to be launched, if you remember. The actual plan was at the end of 2019 before anyone knew it would be online. And if you think about it, since that was the spiritual successor to, they tried doing that before with PEA, right? That was going to be North America's big push for CS, believe it or not. That was the whole point of buying into that org for $2 million and being part owner, was that would then justify, like LCS, building big rosters and not having to worry about, did we qualify to the major? Are we into this tournament? The idea was that was going to finally be the green light for all these NA owners. Well, think about the NA owners that don't exist, right? Cloud9 has a Russian team and has had Russian players for years now. They used to be the NA org. Then you had, Liquid technically sort of a bit NA, but they're doing the Vitality things where they're not really. You're just doing enough players to seem NA, but you're not really spiritually trying to be an NA team. Gen G is literally, if you don't know, they're only the number 1 team, arguably, in League of Legends. They have one of the best teams in Valorant. They're not in CS at all. They were at the time. That was when they were making that big push with the SOM and DAPS roster, if people remember, Bentet, etc., when they had him over. You had Envy back then, still one of the biggest orgs in COD. If people don't know, probably always will be. They were still messing around with that lineup with Legia back then. So there was a bunch of people back then. Those people, when they exited, none of them ever came back. No one came back. Like, think about who came to replace them. The M80s of the world, like teams that never were anyone. Like, that's not a big org, guys. Like, I don't even know what the org structure of that team is. And by the way, I also agree with you there. That's the part that people missed. No one actually lost any top talent to Valorant, right? The one exception being probably Ethan, because he actually was a true top 20 talent, and he actually just chose of his own accord to just go over. No one made him. He didn't have to. He could have stayed in City. Probably going to be on Liquid himself, if he'd wanted to be. He's the only one who actually chose to go. When people like Nitro went, Automatic went, that's because they didn't like their options in CS. We were stuck in the online era. Those ones weren't real. Like people like Tens and Som, and they hadn't become who they were yet when they were in CS. So we didn't lose those talents. But I definitely agree. What we lost was the entire next generation. Like, if anything, actually, people like Malbs are the rare person that stuck around. Like, everyone else who had the skills already was in that game. I meant to do a video once, I just never got around to it, where the joke was going to be, instead of asking, where is Tier 2 NA, I'll show you. I'll just open VCT Americas for the last 3 years, and you will see all of the people who are going to become the next ones. In fact, that was the irony of Flashpoint Launders. I actually fucking watched a load of those guys, the dappers of the world, who were right on the cusp of becoming the next players, and then they all just went to Valorant. So they actually did become the top players. It's not in our game, unfortunately.
And everybody thought that they would come back to, or everyone thought that they would come back or they would get pushed out, but they still lead the scene in Valorant. They're still the top players in Valorant. So that's never changed. That's been a huge problem. And on your point from the business side of things, I remember when I was like at a point where I was trying to figure out if Boxer should be like an organization and should sign players just because I thought it would be fun to try to do. And I remember reaching out to a bunch of CEOs in CS, and I asked them for advice, like, would you recommend doing this? And I remember, I won't name anybody, but I remember what the best piece of advice that I had was, don't get into it, because they said you don't want to live and die by your team winning and losing every day and not knowing, if someone's going to make a roster move or if there's someone going behind each other's back. It's just not a way to live. So he recommended not getting into it. But another thing that someone brought up that was a European CEO was...
By the way, that's always a good sign when someone whose whole life CS, like, I just recommend you don't ever get involved. Like,
don't do what I did.
Turn back, save yourself now, Launders. You don't have to become like me, a wretched old husker. What the fuck?
I mean, they could have given me the advice to just do it because their life is so great.
Yeah,
so, I mean, maybe they saved me. I just did a clothing company, way less overhead. I'm happy. So, but then the European CEO that I talked to was shitting on North America because they said that what happens in North America is that the salary inflation is so much more exponential than it is over in Europe.
Oh, sure.
That European orgs don't like doing business with anybody in America. And what you had in CS was inflation's salaries got inflated so high for players that are not even the quality of the European players that they were going up against. Then when the North American orgs themselves couldn't compete in CS to buy those players as they went to different teams and their salaries kept getting too high, they left to go to Valorant and just left, basically pulled the ladder out from under them, left the salaries too high in CS, made it so that no players wanted to play in North America because suddenly either you had to take like basically no salary and build up a new team, or you could just go over to Valorant and get some of the newly inflated salaries. And so they just like completely destroyed the like economy of CS in North America specifically, all while, players like Cooksey were getting paid like $8,000 to play on G2, $8,000 a month. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like you couldn't get any IGL of even that quality in North America, and they would be getting paid 15 minimum. So yeah, that also didn't help.
Obviously now, if you take a look at what we're left, it's like the sort of stragglers, if you like. So there is an M80, there's a Nouns, but then Liquid, I mean, Thorin, you mentioned them. My understanding is that entire team is actually based out of Europe. Like that's where they're sitting because that's where they can play. And then you've got Complexity, which is sticking to their North American roots. They're all still based in the States, which always blows my mind. I don't understand why they haven't all moved to Europe because I feel like that's probably going to be easier on them and they'll have more time to crack. But they've chosen to like just keep themselves as strongly North American as possible. Why do you think that is, Thorin?
I mean, one thing I will say is this is why, actually, it's a shame one of those people isn't on this show, because I'd like to see them tell you, as I've seen these motherfuckers actually sit in rooms with, like, JKS sat over there and go, like, I don't really like having to stay away from home a lot when I'm traveling, It actually really sort of gets on you after a while. And people like JKS are just sat there, like, barely holding it together. Like, really, bro? I've seen my family, like, one time in five like, so anyway, like, that's just North American privilege right there, isn't it? I know. That's only a North American would ever sit down and go, hey, that video game we invented that, checks notes, all the money was raised from our region. Oh, to be a pro at it, and I played every day for, like, checks notes, 5 figures a month. I have to like leave the country. No, I can't just stay at home and do it all. Can't I work from home? Why am I being called into the office? I thought COVID meant we didn't have to. Give me a break. Like anyone else just goes, oh, I'd like to be a top pro. Where do I have to go? Where do I sign up? It's put me in the game, coach. So a bit of it is, unfortunately, in their particular case, not only do Americans tend to want to stay at home, I don't blame them for that. It's just like I pointed out there, certain people can't be fucking choosers, can they? If you're from South Africa, from Australia, tough shit. If you want to be pro, you have to move to another region. It's just the nature of of the gig in the same way as if you're like a fucking hockey player from, I'm guessing, like Italy. I bet there's not that many opportunities there. You should probably go to the NHL, mate. You probably have to live in North America, I imagine. So I do think there is a resistance to that. And unfortunately, here's the problem, Sam. They have the ultimate resistance to that. They have EliGe. And not only is he the best NA player, but he doesn't want to fucking move. So unfortunately, if you've got the big dog doesn't want to move and he can stay at home, and quite frankly, he's overqualified to be on your team. And then lastly, I'll just add this detail in there because it's obvious, which is here's what the real problem will be, is say you ever convinced EliGe to live in Europe, Launders. You'd think, oh, brilliant news for Call. Now they could just get another player. No, the obvious question then is, why is EliGe staying on Call? You know, that in a way, it's a good problem to have if you're Call. The day this guy says, by the way, I'd just like everyone to know, Vitality, G2 Phase, I'm just available. Anyone who wants me, come get me. Isn't it going to be like the greatest bidding war ever? Like, this is the most obvious person after Twist. Everyone wants to migrate. Him and Naf, I'm pretty sure everyone, unless you're the biggest TL fan ever, you sort of want to see these guys playing a Phase or a Vitality and see what they can do, just like you saw with Twists in Phase 2022. So, unfortunately, I think that's a big part of it. It's like, in general, they don't want to go to other countries. And also, you got Jason Lakes. You can always play up that angle of like, we're the OG, NA org, etc. I mean, there is no Team 3D. You basically are the most old school at this point in time. So I think right now, I don't really think it's the strategy. Like, I think if they could get for the exact same salaries they currently play, a shit hot, like, if they had the Mouse players, I think they would have Mouse tomorrow and they wouldn't be NA. And magically, they wouldn't pivot into the whole NA thing. Oh, in fact, if anything, you'd be smart and go, it's a bit like when we had Zet back in the day. Yeah, imports. Actually, we're American, but importing, because, you know, the other angle Americans always do. They go, what's more American than paying someone to come to your country, then saying he's from your country? It's like, I mean, I don't know about that really, mate, but I guess it's a reach. It's a reach, but you always do it anyway, so it's all good. So I think that it's also a bit of circumstances. By the way, it's also inferred to me that actually their results, again, if you looked at their salaries, they actually min-maxing pretty well on some of these players. Like, this isn't another team where they're getting paid like Falcon salaries or something. Like, they probably have a very reasonable budget that they're actually probably doing pretty well with now. The problem is, if you don't know about the industry side, you want them to be better, don't you? Who doesn't? They've got one of the best players in the world.
I was going to save this rant for a little bit later, but I got to disagree with that, man. I fucking hate this. Like, Maui is obviously good friends with the Cole guys, and I like them too. And honestly, you can argue on paper that this team gets the results that they should get. But what I would say is that this team has consistently shown us that they could have won more, gone farther, had more playoffs, taken bigger wins. Like, we know that about Complexity. In fact, the only reason that we get angry about Complexity is because they show us the games that they can win, right?
Sure.
Like, we just watched them play against Falcons at the Showdown. We know that they could have won that game. They should have won that game, right?
Sure.
They played against M80 at EWC. They were good enough to beat M80. They lost in that overtime match in that best of one. You saw the throw. Okay, they were good enough to beat anybody at Yala Compass. They didn't win a single map at that tournament, one where Nip and Furia made it to the semifinals. They were good enough to beat Vitality at the major and go 3-2. They got 3 rounds on that T side and threw Anubis. Everybody remembers that. If you can't remember a Complexity throw, you are a fucking goldfish. They were good enough to beat FaZe at Sydney. They had that overtime loss on Ancient in the first game, and everyone thought this is the beginning of the peak for Complexity. And what happened? Every single match that I just referenced happened after that. It has been nothing but disappointing losses because we have seen all of the overtime games where Complexity could have closed out but didn't. All the leads that they started with and couldn't close on. We know that they can be better. If they were always just budding and promising, and even if they had EliGe or didn't and made deep runs and almost didn't get far enough, that's something. But we know and we can see and reference the exact matchups. The fucking Imperial match to qualify to Rio with Fang. We know that they could have won that. They could have beat outsiders at Kato to make quarterfinals in 2023 with Fang. We know they could have won that, dude. They could have beat Cloud9 at Dallas with Sonic. Everybody watched that game, and as much as you think, oh, well, they had Sonic, oh, they had Fang, now they have EliGe, and now they still have the same losses.
Everything Launders just said, I just agree with. I agree with you so much, because this is my frustration with this team. Obviously, I have personal relationships with the IGL, with the coach. Like, I'm attached to them in that way, but it is a frustration that I get, and I always thought that maybe it was because I was friends with them, but I feel like it's more than that now, because exactly what you said, I watch them play certain games, I see them pop off, and I go, flip, this is the level you can actually play at. But holy hell, they never get there. It's like once every few games you get to see what they're capable of, and then the rest of the time they choke, and it's a mess, and it looks terrible, and they're not talking. And I mean, during Cologne, for me, the biggest thing was EliGe was playing so incredibly well. Like, he was just insane to watch, but he was like having to carry all this dead weight with him. It didn't matter what he did. And I think Pimp was on the desk with me at one point where he was like, we have to say that EliGe is, that the argument has to be that he's one of the top players in the world. Yes, he is, but it doesn't matter if you're losing. No one cares. Like, you have to do something with all of those parts. And I don't understand why this team just cannot seem to find, I mean, they find their form, but it's like a miracle if they come in and they actually play to the level they can play. But the rest of the time, it's just not there. Why do you think that is, Launders?
They're the only team that, I think they're the only tier 1 team that don't do a huddle before the game starts. They don't do anything to improve their mood before they go live. And when you watch them play, they're the most emo looking team, which honestly, like when you see Hauser get tilted, it's because he missed an easy shot in a late game situation. Like, his stats always look fine and he has like generally good output, but he misses important shots in big moments. That's undeniable if you watch any of the games. When you watch EliGe get frustrated, that's because his team fucked up a situation. Like, EliGe, like when people compare EliGe to other players, you can say the stats are one thing, right? But he's a beginning of round player. He's an opener, right? He's an opener and a closer, to be honest. He can do everything, and he has the high risk roles. Like, he goes in for entries and everything like that. So for him to get the stats that he has, we know that he could upgrade like so many teams in Europe, because whereas if you take like some kind of lurker like Blame F or something, you know he's a great player, but you don't know if you'd necessarily upgrade teams because he doesn't have the same kind of impact for the same stats as EliGe does, or someone with, you know, a high KPR, high opening percentage and all of that. When I see this team get frustrated, I see a team that never cared about winning. They were more afraid of ending the game and getting embarrassed, and that's why they always do get embarrassed. In these later moments, I think back on when they came onto the server, you could literally forecast the way that it's going to get to a third map and get to 10-12, and then they drop to an eco, and then they go to overtime and they lose. I've said it in cast before the series have started. That's how confident I am that it's going to happen. And it's not even me bragging about how prescient I am. It's obvious. It literally happens like clockwork. And I think it starts with the team spirit.
Do you think it's an emotional thing, Thorin? Is it just a mental game and this team is just not all connected? Is there more to it than that?
My problem with this squad is they themselves even seem to sort of know that they're stuck in purgatory. Because if you ever see their interviews now, it's nothing. It's just, they're just, as you call it, like fucking turning their wheels. Like, they'll just say absolute bollocks platitudes. Like, we got to work more as a team and pull together so we can elevate to the next level. And I want to just go, bro, you've had the same 5-man lineup for a year. The entire game was just this 5-man lineup. Like, they made this lineup like just before CS2 began, if people remember. And as Lons just said, their best actual success was the beginning of CS2. So at the beginning of CS2, you broke out. You actually had a pretty decent lineup. Everything was working well. JT was mad overperforming. EliGe was back to his best. You actually could, for real, have won that IM Sydney event. Then the CAC event, you were right there too. After that, though, it's only been diminishing returns. And I definitely agree. The biggest problem, you have two parts here. One is that you don't just rely on EliGe. That isn't just like, oh, it's like nurturing heroic. Like, no, that's like a star in a team. This guy is your team. Like, bro, what the fuck would this team be without him? Like, the only player I can even think of in the top 10, 15 who might be more impactful is maybe like Xantares on Eternal Fire. But they both basically have to do the majority of the round. Like, I'd love to see some sort of like a cynical tracking of like, the second one of these two players dies, how many times do they ever win the team round? Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like it drops to 0. Because as you say, Lon, it's not only does he have to go in there and do all the work on like T-side to like win 2 duels, ideally he needs to stay alive so one of the other idiots doesn't fuck it up at the end. Like, it's actually fucking infuriating watching this team play. It's also a team where this is a really bad sign. If the right 2 or 3 people are alive, you know they're not winning the round and it's a save. You just there's not even hope in your brain that they're going for this 2v(x), 1v2, and that they're going to win it. Like, that's not even in your mind. Like, you're already ready for them to save. And then lastly, for a team that's had the same 5-man lineup a whole year, man alive, the team play is not that great, is it? Like, you'd hope that would be the core strength, right? What I want this team to be, if you don't need to change the lineup, is this team basically needs to be the old Ents from CSGO. You've got to be like, okay, every player doesn't have to be great. great, but just all be sort of like a little bit better than people think. Have a really coherent core, well called around as the IGL. Obviously, Halzerk is no son pious, but get a bit of frag and a little bit of impact hopping, and then we've got a really good rifler. So let's let the riflers go to work. Aggressive rifler, open some get. They have sort of like the star rifler, a little bit of the AWPer. I think JT is a good IGL, but I don't think his team's good enough to actually have like a super coherent style. I think actually for real, I'm done with the whole they need one piece. They actually just need to break the team in half and rebuild it, in my opinion. Like, keep the pieces you think are good. You keep 2 or 3 of them, but it has to be a rebuild. I think it's seen its better days. You've seen the highs and the lows. You've had every possible result from this call team. And by the way, Launders, the whole time they've had that choke factor, that has never gone away from them. Even when they win, you know it's coming in the next match. It's probably one of the more. It's funny that Liquid gets that because they just lose big games. Liquid isn't even massive chokers team. This is the choker team, bro. Like, if anything, EliGe was patient 0. He's just in a new location now. This is like what, Outbreak 2. EliGe's Boogaloo. There you go.
Off the back of that, though, I'm going to say, I don't want to I feel like I'm going to probably upset players, but I am going to say it. I mean, Launders, you spoke about like how emo this team looks when you see them on camera. You know who looked very emo was Team Liquid when EliGe was in them. Like, I remember the Paris Major, the exact same faces, the exact same lack of comms. Like, I don't want to blame a player, and he is the best, so I wouldn't get rid of him. But I don't know if sometimes EliGe's tilt helps everyone else. I just wonder if I also know that I'm that person, right? So when I get annoyed, I make sure that everyone in the bloody room is just as annoyed as me. Because like, I feel like I'm obviously very important and everyone should suffer the same way I am.
Okay.
So I can recognize it when I see someone else. If they get tilted, they make sure everyone knows about it. I'm starting to wonder if maybe that is the EliGe effect, is if he's not happy, God damn it, no one else will be.
It's a very fair thing to consider. I mean, I really think that when those matches go deep, I feel like sometimes, Grim messes up his positioning, his communication, his spray a little bit in a late round situation, or Halzerk dropped a shot, partially because they're worried about getting reamed out by EliGe after the round is over, or knowing that they're sitting beside him and his energy is his chakras are off. You know what I mean? Like, he's fucking fuming inside. You know what this team talk is going to be like later. Like, you're not going to sleep for another 4 hours after this game's done and the adrenaline's through. Like,
he's even worse, because here's the thing. At least someone like Simple will just turn to you and you're just waiting for the backlash. You're waiting for him to go, what the fuck are you doing? That you can handle, though. In a way, you even know you deserve that launch. You fucked up the round. The worst thing of the least is you're turning to him. He's got that face on. And you're going, everything all right? Everything all right, Sean? Yep, I'm fine. He says he's okay, so we're just going to nip out. But it's still in the back, isn't it? It's still just working away and marinating. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. I think
that's the worst.
And I will say, it's kind of like Jordan. Everyone else complained about Jordan, about the fact that he was a hard teammate to play with. But if you were good enough, then he was the perfect guy to play with, because he's going to iron out every flaw in your team, right? Sure. And I think that when you had 2019 Liquid, they just had players who are good enough quality to play with someone like EliGe. They all got tilted and everything like that, but they were good enough. They still won. Because why? Because EliGe was actually doing a good job on the server, and he was also right about why they were losing. So the team that is good enough to play with EliGe will prosper, but a team that is maybe emotionally too weak. I mean, I know Grim got bullied when he played on Liquid the first time, I'm sure he was partially scared about the thought of EliGe coming over to the team, even though he knew there would be an upgrade, because emotionally it's going to be harder. But at the same time, he has to be good enough. I can never side with someone who goes against EliGe on this roster when I watch the rounds that are being played. How do you argue against the quality that you see? It's one thing to say that if EliGe was, could contain his emotions more, the team might be marginally better, but they probably still wouldn't be a championship level team. That's the difference. He knows why they aren't, and they can't figure it out.
Also, by the way, you have a hard time ever speaking back to it, because I'll tell you one thing I think's mad underrated. Bro, how does he keep it together the whole time? Somehow every single game he mentally resets and pretends like I'm actually playing a top 5 team, and this makes sense what I have to do in these rounds. I'm actually somewhat impressed he doesn't wig out more. I know it's not really his style to be super emotive. He just sort of reacts in the moment when he's annoyed. But I'm surprised he isn't more than the Nico angle, mate, where you just fucking doing all those crazy pantomime face, oh what the fuck? Like, because I think it's wild. Because I agree with you. That conversation we were talking about earlier. The saddest thing is, normally what you say about someone like EliGe is, well, because you're not having to play the big finals in the semis, we can't actually give you that status of like sixth best player in the world because those guys do play all the big semis in the finals. I'd go the other way. Bro, take any of those people in that category after Donk, Z1, Monacy. So take Exertion, Frozen, Shiro. Bro, why wouldn't this guy be in that category? He should be. His team's just not good enough to let him be. If we were doing those EVP things, he'd be winning one every fucking tournament. Like, for real, he'd be like sixth best player or someone on HLTV's list. Maybe he still will be. I don't know how they calculate it nowadays. But I actually feel like to some degree, EliGe does get like less than his credit because I think he has to do so much on this team, mate. It's mental.
Yeah, it is actually one of the... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think if EliGe is reaming you out, if you take a look, you have to look at how he's performing. He's allowed to. It's just an agreement. I'm like, if you are if you are playing the best and you are carrying the team, you can shit on them as much as you want at the end of the day and tell them that they're crap. You're allowed to do that because he is and like you said, he resets every single time. He is not dropping in form, despite the fact that I would argue certain pieces around him really are just not stepping up at all. So he's allowed to do that. And they're going to have to learn how to handle that. And I feel like maybe there's a sports psychologist that needs to come in and go, you have to accept the fact that he's going to tell you he's fine, but when we walk out of this room, he is going to shit all over you and you will have to accept that or just get good.
Yeah, I think, is it true though? Like, is there anybody else that doesn't do a huddle or doesn't do anything before the game starts? That's just like a classic, like sports team, 3-2-1 type of thing just to get on the right page. Like, I mean, I remember like, Cadian, it was like at Rio where Cadian would like, he'd come down to breakfast and Tessus would just be like sitting there enjoying his breakfast. By the way, it's kind of unhinged, but Tessus would just be kind of enjoying his breakfast and Cadian would be like, how are you doing today? Like, how are you doing today? And then Tessus would be like, yeah, I'm good. And Cadian said like, if he didn't respond with like the same energy that I gave him, then I'd wake him up. You know what I mean? Because we'd start the same. I kind of misquoted this thing. I know something like this happened that he said himself. So he wouldn't have made himself look this crazy. But he was basically.
By the way,
saying
notice how much cooler.
Everybody's on the same page.
Notice how much cooler that sounds. Where then you go into the finals, you're in the major thing. It
Yeah.
doesn't sound as cool anymore when it's totally destroyed the whole team. And everyone's like, I hate that guy so fucking much. And like they're just all like, listen, I might go down for breakfast. Anyone seen Cadian? I think he was down there earlier. Right, I'll nip down quickly. It doesn't sound as cool anymore now, Don. It was doping, heroic. Yeah, it sounded awesome then.
Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I think classically, in sports, I think we've seen it be an important thing. I don't think people have to be friends, but I do think they have to be on the same page. And I do think you have to be like a certain level of awake, to shake off all of the fear, nervousness, and doubt has to be gone when the match starts, right? Like Monacy talked about going to Cologne and just thinking about the games one game at a time instead of thinking about the fact it's the most epic tournament, that's ever happened. And that's when you see people crumble. When you see... Yeah, and also to your point, Sam, you've got sometimes the only way that you can actually see how good a player is when they play for a weak team because there's never otherwise a real test, right? Like you might have like Mezzi on Vitality, for example, in my opinion, could be a way better anchor, but he's still getting trophies and he still has some good rounds, but you don't really get to see him exposed, for his weaknesses as an anchor specifically because his team is doing so well right now. But like, could Mezzi carry a Complexity? And he's not he's not that kind of star player. But would he? I don't think so. And I think that's a third thing. Since we just talked about that, is
by the way, what a bummer that is. That Mezzi, in theory, is the player loads of people wanted kicked from Vitality. But bro, when you say that, I'm like, I'll take that deal tomorrow. Can we have Mezzi on call? Like, that's not a great sign. When I would instantly take that player. Like, I actually feel like that's exactly the sort of player they need, mate.
Yeah, maybe that's true. And yeah, they're not roles there don't really make sense. But I also just want to say there's also some examples of that where like I feel like Mezzi would be a better player in star roles, but he's not good enough to be a star player.
Sure.
So he has to learn how to be an anchor on this team because you see the aim sometimes. You see the individual plays like he has big, even late rounds and stuff like that. Just holding sight sometimes. That's I think where he struggles a bit. When you and I think the same thing goes for Grim, right? He's the guy that when he played on Triumph, he got everyone in North America's attention because he was unreal in terms of his star level in some big games as the star player, most space, star rifler, all the roles, everything, T-side entries. He was unreal. He was amazing. Like it was the perfect primer to get a chance to play on a team like Complexity or whatever. But now that he's gone to a team like Complexity and is clearly not good enough to be as good as someone like EliGe or replace him in his roles, does he have a place, right? Does he have a place on this lineup if he would do better in star roles on a different team? does he need to learn how to be a better star player and go to a different lineup, or can he improve in his positions on Cole? I feel like that's a hard question for Complexity.
I was trying to think about teams that didn't do. Does Virtus Pro do a huddle? I always feel like they're very alien and don't have a lot of human emotion. I can't imagine them in a huddle.
Problem is, we're all
Maybe.
just scared to ask what the fuck they do before games at this point in time. Like, Jesus Christ, who knows what they're doing in the huddle? Yeah. I bet it's like 3 octopuses going mental in a fucking hungry hippo games down there, Launders.
They all jerk off on a cracker.
It was something like that. I made it more classy, you know. I kept it classy.
I like that. I always thought I have like a weird Anders strange thought about Virtus Pro where I feel like they're just a bunch of aliens that came to Earth to study us, and then we're like, hey, Counter-Strike's fun, we'll stick around. That's how I've always kind of felt about VP, but there you go. I don't think they do a huddle. I do find it weird though, because we were talking about like the Complexity mental state. Like they always look miserable when they're playing, but the rest of the time they're really happy. That's what always blows my mind. You see them all together, they're super happy and smiley and getting along, which I find quite odd. Like they will lose badly, and then I'll see them all in like an elevator at the hotel, all happily chatting and being like, oh yeah, it sucked that we lost. I was like, you
just love losing.
I know, even though I know what she means it like as a positive, like, you know, they don't let it get them down. The problem is that does make them sound like the biggest losers of all time. They're just like, hey, I got 6 kills, I got 7, we're still getting paid, motherfucker. I don't know how we're doing. Oh, hey, EliGe, sorry, what, you can go to your room now if you want. Yeah, my bad. Oh, still, how we get away with this? I used to be on Triumph. This is amazing.
This is my point though, because I've started looking at it, and I mean, maybe I'm just getting jaded where I'm like, what the fuck? You should all be mad. Like, be unhappy. You should not, I am not happy with you. You should not be happy. But they
I think what you're saying is like, it might as well be happy sometimes, right? At least there's happy sometimes. But like in a sports environment, it doesn't actually matter at all if you're friends. Like, it doesn't.
I've got a mean question for you. Here's my mean question, though. I joked about there, but I sort of mean it, Launders. That's actually my biggest problem with this team. Is I think that everyone who isn't called EliGe is actually sort of all right with these results. I don't think it's the end of the world to them, bro. I don't think they go to bed and cry themselves to sleep because they couldn't make the playoffs of Cologne. If you're EliGe, you should, by the way. You're capable of doing it. Like,
well,
bro,
because the other argument.
So I worry about that. I worry about the other players not having the sort of drive and the killer instinct, you know.
Well, that would be giving them credit, because the other argument would be to say that their players aren't good enough to get good, right?
Okay.
Because if they cared and they were good enough, then they would get good, because they've got EliGe on the team. He knows how to win these rounds. Like, I guarantee you, he's told them everything they need to hear at this point. Like, right? You think he's like held back or said the incorrect thing? Like, he's showing us every day he knows how to play top tier CS. So, and he's obviously a great communicator. We've seen his YouTube videos. He knows how to explain these rounds. So I doubt there's no world, in my opinion, where EliGe hasn't told them everything they need to know.
Yeah, you're right. It's even worse. 1, they already can watch EliGe's YouTube. 2, they can use his official refrag tool. And 3, they can even get private coaching from him. And they still suck. So we've actually mathematically proven that Cole just suck at CS. Like, sorry, EliGe, you did it through all your means and vehicles. I didn't make you do it. You know.
How's that? He can be a fucking content
creator. Here's the joke. Are you any Launders? There's a story that says at the end of his time in the Lakers, when the Lakers were quite bad, that Kobe once came in, and as you can imagine, he had everyone wearing the Kobe signature shoes, right? So when they'd lost a whole bunch of games in a row, the story goes that he came in and he told the trainer, take all the Kobe's off them. They don't deserve to wear them. You're all fucking bums. The joke is, EliGe should actually ban all the other players in Call from using refrag, because he's the best advertisement for him, but they're the worst advertisement. So they shouldn't, until they get good, they're not allowed to use refrag, because they're making it look bad. You're making it look bad.
Oh shit, that's true. He's the only one having refrag moments.
Yeah, exactly.
These spray transfers,
exactly.
Like that, so
stop watering the product down. Leave until you've earned your way back in. You don't get that beta access anymore. No more.
Yeah. They need to go right back to the wax on, wax off method.
Exactly.
Like straight up.
Yes. Enough about GM and VP.
Yeah, but like.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if they were quality enough, I bet they have everything else they need to prove that they are good enough. So. Like Dunk is literally being nice to them. He's saying that if they might, they might need to care more or something like that. But if that was true, then it must be that they don't care, right? It must be that. That's how I feel too.
I just don't get it. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a South African bias. I thought JT, when we moved to CS2, really improved. Like, I think this year he has stepped up and improved. Last year I might have had a very different opinion, but it is a bit of a South African bias. But I wonder now, if you take a look, I mean, Thorin, you said it earlier, you have to break this whole team up, rebuild it. Complexity wants to stay North American. How the hell do they do that? Because is there any pieces that they can actually put into this?
Wait a minute. I have to do this. Is now where for the next year of talk shows, I'm going to be insufferable because everyone who's a fan of like when there used to be NA, it was Cloud9. Now there's Team Liquid, and now there's Call, right? You know when everyone does this game, Launders, where they go, there's no talent. Why can we get anyone? Oh, sorry, that Malbs guy, you can have him G2. Oh, where the fuck's all the talent? There was a little kid from Guatemala sat over there looking like some fucking, like the sim of the fucking librarian waiting the clock off at the library. Like, she's going to put the books at your wake. Oh, you're playing your games again. Oh, nice. Oh, you got a G2 offer. Like, why were you all just sat there? You were playing them every day. You were like, should we get him? Nah, he's just
G2 played him once and then signed him.
It's mental, isn't it? Bro, he was sat there the whole time. That would be like, imagine this. I'll show you the ultimate, like, obnoxious example, fans. Imagine now the best fucking Polish team, whoever that might be, 9-9 or something, Launders. Imagine they came out and went, well, where are we supposed to find up and coming Polish hoppers? You'd turn around like, are you fucking dizzy? There was one over there called Ultimate. You weren't picking them up for the last 3 years. Like, it's the same thing. So all I want to tell it
question, right?
You know, crazy idea. Here's how you find players speak from any. Open your fucking eyes and have a look. Oh, that guy's pretty good. Can I have him, please? What are they doing? They're doing that thing. They only acknowledge he's good after the fact when he's already gone to G2. Like, you can already see he was good. Just sign him to the fucking team. That tilts me so much. Because he was just imagine if we go back in time now, Launders, 6 months ago, and we can just put Malbs any position on this team. Like Grim Spot, we can just give it to Malbs. Like, bro, wouldn't we be cooking right now? Wouldn't that be a fucking interesting line? It'd be pretty good, right?
I mean, look how much they've been embarrassed in that regard. They literally, they lost to M80 at EWC, who just picked up Lake to replace Malbs. Another player from North America that they took a risk on and beat Complexity at a LAN with that brand new player.
They don't even have the best guy called Lake in North America, for fuck's sake. They've got the second best
Jason
Lake.
And Lake on the same fucking team.
That one's just a slam dunk. Come on, marketing.
Dude. But yeah, does it mean they have no scouting at all? They literally got embarrassed by a player they could have picked up who replaced a player that he's not nearly as good at. Lake is not nearly as good as Malbs, and he just replaced him and still beat you. How is that?
I'll jump on the other side because we spoke about this earlier on. Is it also not a case of a lot of not a lot, but there are North American players like Malbs who are going, you know what, fuck it. Like, I want to be the best in the world. I want to play in Europe eventually. I've seen Complexity. They don't want to move. They don't want to make the hard choices. And I want to be on a team that's willing to do that. So no, I don't want to play with you. I mean, that also be a situation.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that's true. But do you think that they reached out? It's
not true. I don't think they've even reached out.
She made it up,
trying to give a different story.
I know. He's just too kind. Yeah, maybe that is true. Yeah.
Oh, maybe it's true that they reached out, or no?
Nah, I doubt it. No. I think I was just using it as like the counter argument to say, maybe, they should be more committed to going to Europe. The truth is, I think that they're fine. They think this lineup's fine. Like that.
All right, do you know what? I know what they need to do. If Cole's going to be like we're the true blue American team, then I'm going to go into Launders bag here, the political division bag here. What we need to do, Launders, is fully embrace being American and truly make America great again. I don't want you going to these coastal elites where they have all these fancy metropolitan ideas about living in Europe, drinking a fucking cappuccino in the morning. What's that shit? We want to go to the heartland of America. We want to be in the fucking Bible Belt. We want to be anywhere where 30 years ago wrestling would have been the best shit on a Friday night. We want to be there. That's where we're building our complexity training facilities. That's where we're sourcing local talent. The kind of kids, the kind of kids who normally would be just risking actual like spinal injury by charging as a linebacker into a training dummy. That's the guy we're getting grinding on official refrag. Stunner's going to be our training guy. He's going to be sort of like that elderly guy in the first Top Gun who knew the guy's father. He'll be like, oh, hey, I used to know your dad Grim or whatever, you little punk. Anyway, and he'll be like training all these kids up with like some mad system, and then we'll take, obviously none of these people will ever want to leave America, the greatest country in the world and all that jazz. So then we'll have them all and they'll just be ready for call, and they won't go to the other teams because then they'll know they just get shipped, all their jobs just get shipped overseas to Europe and that fucking Germany, Europe or whatever, and they'll all stay in NA. That's the move. You have to truly embrace being American. That's what I want. Captain America.
You know what? That just that made me realize it's simple. Like you got an academy team. Honestly, like
You probably should.
yeah. Well, why not start there, right? Then there would be no excuse. Then there would be no questions about whether or not they're scouting. They would have a team.
Do you know the saddest thing of all, Launders? Funnily enough, I actually only realised this years later. But if you could actually go back in time and you knew that people wouldn't put the money in to buy real CS rosters, Flashpoint should just have been an academy league from day one. It should have been an exclusive academy league where a la Mouse NXT and Navi, you just train up the next talents and give them the best chance to show that they're good. And then it's a separate league, so they don't have to be in our ecosystem and get you blacklisted
from
from
buy into that.
And then eventually you just have that players, and the ones that are good. They probably should have had that years ago, because at this point, like, unironically, you sort of do need it in NA.
Yeah, we do.
Don't you think so?
100%. I mean, I think a lot of players are kind of like either retiring or leaving or not trying to go pro because there's just like not enough things to play in. I think that's the number one.
Yeah, of course.
And then like EG were like the academy, but it was just like, why'd you go and sign 25 players? Because it's all the players in the whole fucking region. So that never really made sense. And then they actually made a decent roster called EG Black. And Junior showed that he could be so much better of an opera than he was on Furia. And Walco is maybe a new IGL. And then what did? They upgraded the whole team, except didn't take everybody. And then they just made a Frankenstein lineup of EG that ended up failing again. So it's like they're close to the idea at one point, but we could definitely benefit from a few orgs with a few academy teams, and that's it. I mean, yeah.
This is something that Jason Lake's spoken a lot about, though, from a complexity standpoint, where he wants to do more North American sort of grassroots stuff. He's talking about how they want to put as much effort as they can into growing the region. So, I mean, I think maybe at a management level, they've realized that they have to do something to like kind of feed the region a little bit. It's like, so maybe he's thinking long
like
term.
A bit late, you know. I'd give him more credit if they had made some moves up until this point, right? If it was M80 saying that, then I would feel more sympathy, because M80 have actually gone out of their way to take risks, have put together decent results, have also sold players as well as got new ones. They're doing everything that Complexity should have. They deserve to have a player like EliGe. So when Complexity are sort of moaning about whatever, like the situation of the ecosystem in North America or options and things like that, and you see another org doing the exact moves that they could have done, I can't feel bad for them.
So what is the next step for you, Launders? If you take a look at Complexity, what has to happen here? I'm presuming they're sticking together till after the major. So next year, what has to happen with this team?
The two things that 100% need to be improved. I mean, I don't know if they do any scouting, but like they don't have any new players. They haven't shown any new signings since EliGe. Like that was the last thing that they've tried to pick up. I think he deserves one more better teammate. Maybe, like Duncan said, it's not good enough to totally change the team, but I think maybe it's hard to find two players to replace two North American players to replace players in a North American lineup. It's probably the North Americans that have to go, by the way. So that's the thing. Like it's, if all the players on the team, it would have to be them to probably be replaced. They probably want to stay in North America for the RMRs and major qualifiers and everything like that. So there's the scouting, and then there's also the team spirit. In my opinion, is like a massive factor. Like I think that that because of my earlier argument, we've seen that they can literally win these games. We've seen countless times, and we can point to almost the exact round where you both knew they were going to lose, and then they were going to drop the lead, and then they were going to lose in overtime. That has happened in 5 or 6 major events this year. That's not even including pre-EliGe. That's not including major qualifiers in the past. Almost up to 2 years before that. That's a symptom of complexity. Is it EliGe's fault? No, it's probably a fault of the same players that were on the team throughout the entire time, right? That's probably the most likely thing. So in my opinion, they need to show that they're going to bring more energy on the days that they come to play. I think if they actually can believe in winning, maybe something like a sports psychologist is obviously where they need to go, but they've shown they can win the game. So I don't know what else to say. Like, if they didn't show they could win the game, then making a roster move would be obvious. But the reason we're so mad at Complexity is because they've shown they can win the game.
Do you think if they fix a few things, they could do a play? Like, I mean, is this a lineup that is in contention for playoff runs, Thorin? Because they are going to be together till the major. So if you're a Complexity fan, this is what you're stuck with.
At the moment, they're like always right on the borderline. They're the team that'll like make it in the last time or upset someone else like a VP or someone and ruin their playoff run, then they'll make it through. The other issue you have, though, is even if they make a playoff, they're pretty much almost everyone you can imagine in a stadium beats them in the opening round. Like if they'd have made the global playoffs, everyone beats them. You know what I mean? They lose to Mouse, Vitality, Nava, everyone. So there's that. To me, it's obvious you do need to make a roster move. You've had this 5-man lineup for long enough. Now, what's sad is, probably the most infuriating thing to me is, because you've got EliGe, and I actually think JT's and IGL's one of the better IGLs, I don't think you even need it to be like, it doesn't have to be an Eco or some fucking superstar player. Seriously, it doesn't even actually have to be a star necessarily. Like, if you can keep EliGe and Holzerk's all right, let's say you could have added, I mean, obviously I'm spitballing whether these ideas, imagine you could have added Perfecto. Mate, that could be the win right there. Think how many games you might win just off that guy winning a 1v2 or holding a fucking CT spot. That's why actually, that's why even though I understand for historical reasons why they didn't want to do it, I was another person pushing for why weren't they considering JKS? Look, maybe JKS doesn't want to join their team. I don't know. But to me, it's another one where it's like, bro, it just rounds our team out, gives us a little bit extra firepower. It's a better player in a position. It's actually a world-class player. I think that's all you need is one more player. It can be an AWP, it can be an aggressive rifler, it could be a supportive element. Just give me one more true good player, and I think this team could do something.
And earlier you said they should just disband, but in reality, that's because we're just mad at them, right?
Yeah, of course.
In reality, we're just mad at them. But the truth is, like, it really does seem like if you do one more move for EliGe, you upgrade, like you're saying, the late round a little bit. If you want to divide it up in the early, mid, and late round, they got enough early round. They just need a little bit more clutch. This team has no X fact, no Riz in the late round. Okay, no fucking style, no belief. Like you need one player who doesn't need other people to believe in him. They need a JKS to pull out the 1v2, Perfecto to get the clutch. That you just let him alone. He brings back the energy just by winning. Like let someone like that. They don't have that at all. So I think that's right.
There surely must be that player somewhere in the USA or Canada or in South America. Surely there must be someone that fits that criteria. Maybe it's a new player, maybe it's someone we've known for a while that's sitting there that they could find. That has to exist. It's a very big, it's North America and South America. You got all that space. There's got to be someone there, right, Launders? They're just not looking, maybe?
Doesn't actually technically have to be from any though. As long as you keep 2, 2, and 1. So as long as you got the South African, you keep one, pick one of Floppy and Grim and keep EliGe, and then you can still be a European, could come in last. We can still do that. Or we can have South American too.
That's why I'm doubtful of the scouting. It's like, how the fuck did Twist find Ultimate? You know, where does that come from? Like, you know, who knows how long he'll stay as good as he did, but like, they found a guy that can literally put up clutches late. They scouted him without any knowledge of like how good he'd be in a LAN environment, and found an incredibly clutch and calm player. Like, so it's like, how the fuck, and on it, none of us knew who Ultimate was. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, credit to Twist, he found someone that no one had on it.
By the way, I'll give you an example of where people aren't fair about scouting. I'll tell you an insane piece of scouting is fucking GL for Navi. Bro, everyone is so full of shit. You never watched him play in Apex if you think he carried them. He wasn't even vaguely their best player in Apex. Like, no, he was average as fuck. It's actually insane scouting. Like, everyone could have picked him. He was in the bloody final. He was already the MVP, almost in the fucking major. The GL pickup was the crazy one. Whoever saw that, whether that was Blade, fucking, I assume it was him, Alexi B wasn't until the end. Like, these players are out there, but you've got to have the fucking eye for it, obviously. I'm not saying we do, by the way. We're just watching the games like everyone else, but there's people in the scene who have that eye for those players. They can find you those talents before they've done it as well. Like I say, GL would have been available, by the way, for a team like this if they'd have come along, of course.
How the fuck does M80 do this? They just got to CS literally last year. They just got to CS. They didn't have a lineup. And then Sicko, I think, messaged me on Twitter and was just like, hey, man, thanks for talking about the team. Love to get more involved with the community. Literally, they came from the outside into one of the most hardcore, nuanced esports that's so difficult to identify. And when you watch someone play Dota, or you watch someone play like any other MOBA, StarCraft, the mistakes are so much more clear. In Counter-Strike, everything is so much more nuanced. Micro decision-making, communication, it's so hard to access that information and identify who's good and who's bad truly, and who will actually scale up and be good at a higher level. It's probably the hardest game in that regard, right? Like, it's a total enigma for most people, and they never figure it out in their entire career. And M80 came into this game like a year and a half ago and signed a team and have already made 5 or 6 moves that like have outdone someone like Jason Lake, dude, who's been here for so long. And I mean, he's probably just so fiercely loyal that he wants to make like their situation work. And I respect him so much for buying back the team in the first place. Like, that was already great. And obviously, I doubt he's involved in as much of the scouting as, you know, some of the management that's on the lineup, right? He's probably doing all the business stuff. I mean, he probably doesn't have an eye for the game like he used to, but he's there to just support in every other way. So I really wouldn't blame him. But if he needs to hire somebody to do the scouting, take a page out of the fucking book of M80. If they can do it with no experience and still show you up, it's like unbelievable. Yeah.
It is pretty insane though when you mention those names, like, because I'm thinking now with the ultimate, I mean, even commentators that were casting that guy's games when he got signed to Liquid were like, this, why would you do that? Like, absolutely, like, so many people were like, this is insane. You have no clue, he's gonna choke. And then it turns out that Twist was right and he was amazing. And I feel like that's kind of Malbs as well. Like, there was a lot of talk about, yeah, he was good in M80, but G2's gonna be a mess, and he's come in and he's like popping off. So it is just finding those people that have an eye for talent, right? And saying, okay, cool. Because I think Complexity could probably work. It would be really cool if they found someone. I would go with someone new, like not someone established. If they could find that new player, if they could find a Malbs or an Ultimate, someone who can learn at the feet of EliGe, there's a really cool way to like build a player up there. And then ultimately also Complexity is meant to be a business, right? So you need to think from a financial point of view, building up a young player that can make you money in the long run. So is it a matter, Thorin, they got to change their attitude for the short term because we want to see them do something in the major, but long term, reevaluate scouting options? I mean, is that really the solution for Cole?
The problem is, if you think about all the episodes we had about the Huxley G2 lineup, half the arguments everyone else tried to postulate were like, yeah, but where's the guy who's a guaranteed upgrade? It's like, fucking hell, or I can only pick like 3 people in the whole world and they're already the best. Like, that's an unreasonable expectation. But guess what? That wasn't the fix for G2. The fix was the same fucking Guatemalan kid we were just talking about earlier that no one gave a flying fuck about last year or any other time in history. So it turns out those players are out there. The problem you find there is, and this is actually even more notorious in League of Legends, but in CS it's still a problem, is people for real who even are in the industry go off like industry hype. And it's like, that's your own supply, you morons. That's your own opinion going out, being reflected off a fucking cave and coming back like, hello, oh, there's someone out there. Hello, it's you, you idiot. You said that. So what's weird is the whole point of scouting and the eye test is that you don't go based on hype of like, oh, I've heard he's good. Or, yeah, but did you see him in that one? You watch him. You tell me if your brain tells me that player is good. Because by the way, if they're good enough, you should be able to double down no matter what people think. Like, I've done this with players in the past. Like, obvious example in the more modern days, I've done it with Dexter. When I go watch his POVs, I'm like, bro, what are we even talking about? This guy's like probably like the 5th best AWPer I've seen in about 4 years. It's fucking unbelievable. Like, the eye test just checks out like a motherfucker. But all the stories like, he's toxic, and oh, maybe he asks for too much. Does he slap their hands too much? Like, the most nonsense side narratives ever. So the reason why for Call, especially, this is infuriating, is, as I said, there's actually a complete misunderstanding people keep having that it has to be an A player. It can be a player from anywhere in this world as long as he is willing to move to NA. So the stupidest thing is, assuming, as they've implied, they don't want to spend a big amount of money and break the bank, then you go the ultimate route. You go out there, you send people to scout tier 2 players in Europe, and what you are looking for, ideally, I think if you're smart, is players where they're trapped in a local scene. They're Czech and they play for a Czech team. They're from Romania, they play with Romanians. They're from... You get the point. You look for the guy there who's actually cracked. Think of Sun Pius when he was on Movistar. You get that guy. By the way, that guy almost certainly is like trebling his salary if he joins your team. He can now go to majors. He had no chance of going to majors before. Probably he wasn't even famous yet. And the best part is you can get him for cheap. So, by the way, if it doesn't work, this is the other thing about the ultimate angle. If ultimate doesn't work, you drop him immediately. He probably gets fuck all salary. He's probably on like a bonuses contract, if I had to guess. You know, qualify to the major, you get this. Get in the top of playoff spot, you get this. You could probably even get these people cheap. So, to me, it's an obvious angle because essentially what we're saying is instead of investing 500k trying to buy like Monacy, which wouldn't even get you Monacy now, just spend 100k on staff that can scout you, not the next Monacy, but someone who's like, let's say, a Sun Pius. I think that's a reasonable like range to be within.
It's not like they just won a major. Like, what? No one expects them to do much right now. Like, everyone is pissed off because they're clearly going to consistently be average or just slightly above average. And, you know, EliGe is going to continue to be good, and that's it. So, like, why not take a risk? It's a perfect chance to do it, man. It's just perfect to try to do it. And like Duncan's saying, if you get a player from Europe, they they're going to be more famous than they ever were playing for Complexity, even if they know there's going to be problems coming over. That's going to leverage them opportunities in the future. You're going to get the chance to play with someone like EliGe. You're going to be one of the most popular, one of the most popular teams in one of the biggest countries in the world. Like, it's going to be great for your career, no matter how you flip it. If you want to take a year off to leave Romania or Poland or some of these smaller regions that have a lot of good prospects to come and try to play. So to say that they would say no is crazy. They would 100% take the chance.
To wrap this up nicely with a bow, I mean, it's a question that's been sitting on my mind for a while, is how much longer does EliGe put up with this, though? Because that's what I'm super curious
I was wondering
about.
what this contract is like.
I've
did
told
he
this
ask
story.
For more players.
I've told this story before, Launders. There's two parts that's dangerous about this story. So one is EliGe was never supposed to be in Complexity. That's real, Launders. He was going to be in Evil Geniuses with Electronic and Zorti and Jax and that mad lineup. That was real. That lineup was going to be made. And since it's too late now, I'm saying it anyway. I've heard they were just such clowns in that org at the executive level. They went to make the lineup last minute. He'd already said no to call. And they went, what do you mean, Zorti? Forza? And then they looked into it like, wait a minute, but they have direct connections to Russian oligarchs. And then suddenly they were like, Mayday, Mayday, and then just backed out the deal because they realized, like, oh, fuck. So they were too stupid to know the Cloud9 thing, which is if you wanted to sign someone who would connect to Russian oligarchs, you don't do it that way. You make them sign to someone else and you sign so that your hands aren't tainted by the whole political sanctions aspect, right? So one, EG already would have had this place. There never even would have been EliGe in Call. So Call was his second option. And he embraced it. He rode with it. They played up the angle like, oh, joined NA. Like, yeah, second fucking option, mate. So he came to Call. And then here's the problem. You know when all that Cadian shit was popping off? Well, I've heard this two times. I've heard one at the beginning when they were making the super team. EliGe was a name someone put on a board and someone took off a board. How about that? So maybe he could have been back in Team Liquid for the super team. And then secondly, I've heard he's another player where, just like I've heard they were trying to get twists out of that bad Liquid into Vitality, I've heard there's a world there again where it's like if EliGe is available, maybe he would have joined, but they haven't pulled the trigger. So the big problem right now is I actually think they're super lucky. It seems like at the moment, EliGe's best prospect, if he doesn't want to leave America, is just this team. But that can't last forever. Like, surely eventually, if he gets pissed off or his level got, surely he leaves, right? So I think that's the ticking clock for me. It's the same thing in G2. By the way, how has that aged, Sam? Every fucking episode about G2, I tell you what no one else says. Watch out, Monacy and Nico might be leaving within the next cycle, though. Every other post, why would they leave, though? He already said no, he'd never leave. Well, how do you like them apples? I told you don't get Nico and Malbs. You get Nico or Malbs, you get Malbs. So the point here is, I think eventually, EliGe isn't going to stay forever. I think he's done an amazing job, I say, holding it together so far. I know he's a guy who really cares about winning, by the way, and even worse than that, hates to lose, and that's very different. I don't think some of those call teammates do hate to lose, mate. I think they get in that elevator, they go, Big Bang Theory downloaded, let's get the pizzas in, like, fuck off. They're on some fucking clown show sleepover shit, doing each other's nails, like, EliGe is in that room, fucking carving, like, into the wall, like, one of those things, like, 5 quarterfinals lost already with 1.3 rating. Like, he wants to win, motherfucker. He wants to win. So.
If I wasn't such a lazy shit, I would go back to all our episodes and I would cut all the G2 ones. Yeah, where you said you have made that comment, and then the day they make the announcements, I'm going to just release it. But I am lazy, so I probably won't do that.
Good.
But there we go. I mean, so
as long as everyone spiritually knows I was right, that's all that really matters, isn't it? I'll never get the actual credit. It's all good. Yeah.
Launders, that's it, right? So Team Liquid is the only hope for North America. That's pretty much how this episode's going to end. You're muted though. Yeah.
I would just say M80 is actually the only hope, truly.
Okay.
They actually only ones actively still scouting in North America. And like Malbs, we got to count them, like in terms of being nearby or something, like they've actually shown they're willing to take the risks, and not just take the risk and be shit. They actually have taken some important wins, and they have also sold players. I think they're the gold standard. I've talked about them a lot this episode, but I think like the only thing that's keeping fans for Complexity is EliGe and brand value, like Jason Lake, legacy and stuff like that. But in terms of who's doing everything right in the same region with the same problems, it's M80.
And on that note, obviously we see Launders is still an ugly hater of Complexity now. Thorin is always right, apparently. And we'd love to hear what you think about Complexity and how you think things could change. So you can let us know in the comments, and we'll see you for the next episode.